This is the Big Deal Podcast, brought to you and powered by New Covenant Baptist Church in Albertville, Alabama. And on this podcast, we're asking the question, what's the big deal? About all sorts of things, Bible, theology, and culture related. I'm Justin.
I'm Brad.
Welcome to the Big Deal. All right, Brad, tell us, what are we doing in this season of the Big Deal?
Well, we're going to go through the narrative of Scripture, especially starting in the Old Testament.
Yeah,
Right at the start
beginning.
of Genesis.
Yeah.
Right in the beginning.
Yep.
It's the first three words.
Yep. Last podcast, we talked about the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Because we want to talk about the narrative of the Bible. We need to understand what the Bible is.
Yeah, what's the nature of the Bible?
The
that
nature.
Sort of thing. So if you missed that podcast, you should go back and listen to it.
You should.
Thrilling.
Absolutely thrilling.
Yeah.
And so today we're starting at the very beginning in Genesis chapter 1. And that'll be super fun. So the question is then, Brad, what is the big deal about Genesis 1?
There are a lot of big deals about Genesis chapter 1. A lot of big deals.
Yeah, that's true.
It's foundational for understanding who this place belongs to. There are big deal controversies about how, right from the jump, you have to decide what you're going to do. How does faith work? How does science work? Metaphysical versus physical.
Providing us some structure for our conversation today.
Yes.
All those things are important to talk about.
All those things are big deals.
Yep.
I think it's probably one of the most fussed about chapters in the whole Bible.
Right now, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last 100 years,
Yeah.
it's like a headliner, you know.
Yes. The more science, the better we've gotten at science, the more we start talking about creation stories.
Yeah, there's like this weird tension in our little Christian subculture of Christianity versus science.
Yeah.
And they...
Well, I know what it is.
Well, tell me what it is.
I'm going to tell you.
What's the big deal
I'm
about
tell
that?
everybody. I'm going to tell you the big deal about
Yeah.
it. It's insecurity.
Oh, yeah.
Because science is the new religion. We don't like it.
Ooh, that is kind of true.
That is true.
Yeah,
That science will solve all our problems.
Yeah.
That's what
solves
the
a lot
culture
of
is about.
problems.
Oh, it solves a lot of problems.
And
And
it probably gives
compared
it-
to like Baal, it's a fantastic god.
Yeah. In like, I mean, it solves a lot of problems, and it gives you a lot of security in understanding the world, right?
Yeah, and people have a lot of faith in it.
Medical things, right? All mostly science based, not all of them, but mostly science based, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You just had a whole.
I know all about.
I
the
saw
medical
your
stuff.
face. You
Yeah.
went, the science has a lot of.
Yeah,
Because you've been reading a lot of peer reviewed stuff lately.
I read a lot of peer reviewed science stuff.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about. Let's just kind of open up with that, like. Let's frame up the tension between science and the Bible, especially it's seen in Genesis chapter 1.
Well, maybe could I frame it like this?
Yeah.
What is it that faith is supposed to do, and what is it that science is supposed to do? And those are where,
Let's rewind
yeah.
one more step.
Okay.
What is Genesis 1?
What is Genesis 1?
What is the point? What's happening?
It is, and people are going to throw rocks at me at my car when I drive by.
Okay.
It is the creation myth of the Bible.
Oh, you use the M word.
I did, but that doesn't mean it's false.
Yeah.
I mean it as a genre. Narratively,
Yeah.
it is. Okay, let's talk about it like so nerds like me will understand it.
Yeah.
It is the world building of the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
He is building the world
Yep.
and how the rules work within that world.
Yeah.
So if you're reading Tolkien or Brandon Sanderson, he's our favorite. Well, Tolkien's probably our favorite. Don't
Yeah.
throw things at me. But I don't know who my favorite is. But you got to figure out how their world works because there's
Yeah.
like magic in it. How does stuff work? If you
Yeah.
throw rocks up in there, do they come back down?
Yeah.
That's what I mean by this. That this is what God is doing in Genesis 1 and saying, this is whose it is. This is how it works.
That's right. And you use the word myth, and like if you
Yeah.
if you hear that word initially, you're not used to using it in this context. Like myth in a lot of settings means an untrue story.
Yes.
It means a fake story.
Yeah.
That's like used to explain reality, but it's a fake story. Like Greek mythology is the way people
Right.
talk about it. And so like there is no Zeus. There's just thunder, and they're just trying to figure out what thunder is. And so they make this guy with a beard and
But this
ripped
is the
and
true
jacked and
myth,
stuff.
as C.S. Lewis so
Yeah,
aptly
yeah.
said. This is the true myth.
The true myth, and there's actually the word myth doesn't actually mean an untrue story.
Yeah.
It means a story that's providing like context and history in true things, right? And this is the true myth.
It's sort of like you might say it's an apocalyptic literature or a poem.
It is a poem.
Yeah, it is a poem.
Yeah.
But it's doing. It describes what it's doing.
Yeah. So if you hear the word myth, we're not saying it's not true. It's completely true, 100% true. We actually said that in the last podcast.
We believe the Bible so much we annoy people.
We believe the Bible more than you do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We're the best Bible-y people in the world.
So if you hear Brad say that, I won't say that because I'm a true Christian.
That's true.
But
he's trying to help me.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that it's not true. No. It means that it's providing vital understanding to understand the rest of the story and to understand life as you know it and as we know it.
Yes.
Right. And so it's creation. Genesis 1 is about the creation of the world, of the universe, everything, not just Earth. We're talking
everything,
the expanse of space, right? And how huge all that is, right?
The final frontier.
We are super nerds.
Yes, we're going.
That was a Star Trek reference, folks. So back to the idea about the tension between science and the Bible.
Yeah.
Genesis puts that on display for our world right now, especially the first chapter, because there's this word called cosmology, right? Cosmology is that's
where you get makeup, right?
Yeah, cosmology means the study of how the earth was formed, right? And there are warring cosmologies, right?
Yes.
There are warring cosmologies within our world, but also within Christianity.
Yes.
And there's basically what that means. There's different theories on how in the timing in the age of the creation of the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so what's the standard cosmology creation account for our culture at large, right? Based on science, the science of the world, and everything.
You talking about the street person or somebody that studies it?
Someone that watched a documentary.
They would say the world probably started in a Big Bang event.
Yeah.
About 4.5 billion years ago, or 14.5 billion.
Yeah.
Give or take a few billion.
Yeah. The universe is 14.
Yeah.
Earth would be 4 billion.
They can see all kinds of interesting things out there with our new telescopes and stuff, like radiation right at the edge of the universe, whatever that.
Seeing the light,
which is weird that we have an edge of the universe.
I don't even know what that means.
Know.
Yeah,
it means there's an edge to this
thing.
It
means
there's an end to it,
or there's at least that's as far as we can go with the telescopes. I don't know.
Yeah, no, we can supposedly see the radiation to the end of it.
To the end, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so
it's
that's
wild.
So there is like kind of like the cultural textbook. I say culture. It's not cultural necessarily. It's just the textbook answer. Standard textbook answers. Nearly 14 billion years old. The Earth is 4-ish billion years old, formed after all that, after a Big Bang. And then what is like, if that's one side of the scale, what would be the other side of the scale that creates the tension? Like the furthest other side of the scale.
From the Bible, people?
Yeah, from like the...
The world is 6,000 years old and everything in it. All the universe is 6,000 years old. Young Earth creation.
Young Earth creationism.
So,
right? That's what it's called.
But it's somewhere in between 6,000 and 14.5 billion.
Yeah, it's a big range. There's a big difference in thousands and billions here. Yeah.
It's an insurmountable number of disagreements.
But even within Christianity... It's not like everyone has solidified on 6,000 years, is it?
No, that's why we started with inerrancy, because one of the trends is that if you don't believe the world is 6,000 years old, you don't believe the Bible.
That's right. You're not a true Christian. You don't
take it literally.
You don't take it literally.
If I hear one more person say you don't take this passage literally, I'm not going to do anything, because whatever I said, I would have to do that thing by the end of the day.
Yeah.
I literally believe it's true.
Yeah.
But we don't read it all the same. And one thing that happened, I have so much.
What does the word literal mean?
I don't know. anymore.
I think it means that you are
Take all the fun out of everything. That's what it means.
It means you're interpreting as the author intended.
Maybe.
That's as close as I can get to it.
I think literally means just taking everything at face value, which is dumb in literature.
Yeah, well, that's what my point though is like if you're a poet,
Yes.
and do you want the people who read your poems to
Read them literally.
read them literally?
No.
Actually, in a sense, you do. You want them.
But see, now you're using literally in a way they're not using it.
Yeah, that's I know. I'm showing you
Yeah.
the ceiling on that word.
If you take
That word has a
if you
ceiling.
take Song of Solomon literally, it's the weirdest looking woman you've ever seen.
Yeah,
She has a tower like a neck like the Tower of David.
That's right.
She has
And
dove's
that's
eyes.
my point,
Her
is
has her
that
little bitty eyeballs. And
literal-
her breasts are fawns.
literal means different things in different genres.
Yeah.
In that, like you ought to, like when you read a poem. I mean, he's trying to maybe help you imagine some, say like a psalm, one of the psalms like that. God is the rock of ages, right? That's an image, right, in your head. And you know what? You are supposed to imagine a rock, and you're supposed to have in mind ancient things, right? You're supposed to have in mind like an eternal rock that does not fade and fail.
Can't break easy.
Can't break and
Firm.
and it'll cleft for you, right?
Yeah.
That's the way the song goes. And that is in a sense a literal reading of the proverb. You're doing what or the psalm. You're doing exactly what the psalmist wanted you to do. The poet wanted you to do. You're imagining those things.
Yes. And
Literal does not necessarily mean God is a stone. That's you've abused it.
Yeah.
Like you've abused the sentence at that point.
right. And I think people notice that stuff in poetry pretty simply.
Yeah.
The problem is, or the trick, or whatever you want to say, is that Genesis 1 reads like a narrative.
Yeah.
It reads like he's just telling a story.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't understand it as a creation, what is the big deal of what God is saying? What was the point of it?
Yeah.
And also the science of it. So I think this is one of the things that happens. Okay, this is my philosophy of it. A lot of the world is becoming more agnostic, atheistic, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that gets shunted or excised completely from people's minds is the idea that there is a spiritual reality at all, and that everything can be described physically. That what we have is physical stuff,
Yeah.
and so there's no such thing as a miracle.
That's right.
And so no such thing as it's something happens that's radical. It's just a wild chance, right? It's not a miracle. It's not a purpose.
Anti-supernatural.
So there's no supernatural, but we are born for the supernatural. And so what begins to creep into the vacuum that's left from the jettisoning of supernatural is hope and faith and science will save us.
Yes.
And so, but there are things science can't do. It can tell us what's happening. It can't tell us why it's happening.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker, why I can't be sure exactly how old the world is. If you allow miracles into the world, if they are true, like God Almighty is doing things that are miracles, upturning of the natural order, science is useless against that.
Yeah. I mean,
You cannot, I tell people this all the time,
yeah,
you cannot science a miracle.
because science is built to observe.
Observe. And when things happen that,
yeah.
that are beyond natural law, it can't do it. So if Jesus Christ rose from the dead,
That's right.
you can't send a team of white-coated scientists in there and say, how did this physically take place? Oh, we know what happened. It was a weird thing with DNA and some radiation came. You can't.
It's not
do
a
that.
miracle then.
You can't have Jesus grabbing dead people by the hand
Yeah.
and saying, "Little girl, wake up."
Yeah.
And she wakes up. Science can't ever explain that, and that's not a denigration of science.
Yeah.
That's not its area. So if there's a literal omniscient, omnipotent God saying, "Let there be light," and it goes boom into being, you're not going to get your little Geiger counter or whatever and figure out how God did that.
Yeah.
Because it's not a science thing.
Well, it's because like whatever is observed from science, it has an origin. It's like, in the origin is God, right?
Well, there are rules in God's creation.
Every science, there's it's an old idea, like from like Isaac Newton and stuff. Like all truth is God's truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Well, God set up a world that works. Yeah, he set up a world that works.
Yeah, that's right. Always.
And so, but that doesn't mean it's always worked that way. And what I mean is, like, let's pretend like we're going to be nerdy, right? We'll play. You're playing some role playing game on your computer, right? You're
okay.
playing Skyrim.
Ah.
Da 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 da. So you're playing Skyrim, and that's a RPG where you play a guy role playing game. You're playing a dude. Well, let's say that dude becomes self aware.
Yeah.
The dude in Skyrim became self aware.
Uh-oh.
And he starts looking around at the stars. There's stars.
Yeah.
And there's stuff procedurally generated.
Yeah.
And he starts thinking, man, this place is old. It would take, if I could get in a rocket ship, it would take me like 3 billion years to get to that little pinpoint star, right? And what he doesn't know is there was a programmer that when he finished it, it was just done. But now then that it's going, all the rules work.
Yeah.
So if he got in a rocket ship, it would take him 1 million years to get there or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. If God went boop and just made the world,
Yeah.
like just spoke it and stuff starts going,
Yeah.
and that's what it sounds like. That's inspired. It goes like that, and everything is like in place.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he's like, all right, this is going to work, and the sun, and this is what we talk about, or he talks about here in Genesis. The sun's here, and the moon goes here. And now you can count the days and the seasons, all that stuff. It could be 6,000. I don't think it could be 6,000, but it could be not 14.5 billion.
Yeah.
He could have messed around with it.
And that's
Yeah.
getting to like what I was wanting to think was like that even within Christianity, there are options in Orthodox, Bible believing, conservative, whatever, like inerrantist, right? Christianity, there are different options in this. You have the 6,000 year young earth creationism. You have a lot of Christians, that are like what they call it, like old earth creation.
Yes.
And there's not really a number on that. It's just like, there's some different.
It's just older.
Just older, yeah.
Yeah.
It goes all the way to the 14 billion.
And it goes back to how they read scripture.
Yeah.
Because we're looking around at stuff and we have written languages that are older than 6,000 years.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know.
But here's what I was going to frame it up is that the whole argument
Yeah.
is new.
Yes. So we have not, historically, as Christians, we got 2,000 years of this.
Yeah.
Not argued about how old the world was.
No.
And they were not dumb in the old days. Like, they could look up and go, man, this thing's big and huge. And
Yeah.
Augustine was like, well, it just all came into being in a moment. Or a lot of the heroes of the faith, even like 100 years ago, like Charles Spurgeon and folks like that, thought it was an old world.
Yeah.
Like an ancient world. So the idea that now you have to believe it's 6,000 years old or else you're not a real Bible believer, it just shows you have a very narrow view of what literature is trying to do.
Yeah.
Not that you don't believe the Bible.
That's right. And so is it, well, let's just say this, all right, because I can already tell, I don't think Brad thinks the earth is 6,000 years old.
I think it could be 10, maybe.
So
I don't know.
Is it possible that it is around that old?
Yes.
Okay. How?
Because if you think of it as like a computer simulation, like I said
Yeah,
before,
just-
not that it is, when God brought it online. So you think about the creation story of Adam in the garden. He's made from the dust, right? And when God breathes the breath of life into his nostrils, we assume he's a full-grown man, right?
Yeah.
So if we had hopped in a time machine and we went back and we found Adam,
Yeah.
we'd be like, oh, this dude's probably 30.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was looking prime. So I'd be like, oh, he's probably 30 years old. And God would be like, I made him 2 minutes ago. So if God can, that's what I'm saying
Yeah.
about science
He
and miracles.
created it
If God
old.
can literally
Yeah.
pull a rabbit out of
Yeah.
a hat,
Yeah.
you cannot tell how old that rabbit is.
That's right.
So the Bible doesn't say how old the world is.
That's right. There's
We-
no
yeah,
verse.
There's
that
no
says
verse that
it's
says
this old. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And tell us, Justin,
Yeah.
how do they come up with 6,000
Oh
years?
my god, it's hard. It's actually a lot of work.
Yes.
It's kind of a couple hundred years ago they first started thinking about this.
Because we were finding dinosaur bones,
They started finding they started.
which I love.
It's
Wish I could find a Tyrannosaurus
it's-
Rex.
After the
Skeleton.
what's that thing called the Renaissance, like this
Renaissance.
science, the Renaissance.
Yeah, say it fancy.
After the science boom, there's a lot of interest in ancient history that
Well, also the
develops.
theory of evolution and Darwinianism starts
Yes,
coming.
that comes
and
in.
it's a competing creation story.
Yes,
as far
it's
as they're concerned.
a
'Cause-
competing cosmology.
Yes,
yeah.
it is. Cut out God. We don't need him.
Yeah.
We don't have to
That's
have
right.
him anymore because we evolved independently.
separate from God's
Yeah.
plan. Yeah.
Just
So
a random thing.
all random. That's a whole entire different worldview. That we're all just a bag of atoms. That
We
just,
are a bag of atoms.
but that's all we are.
That's all we are.
Just
There's
a-
no physical
We're
thing.
just a sack of atoms.
There's no
that are-
spiritual.
Yep, that's right. And everything that's happened to you is completely random. You've been formed by. It's what started as just a random primordial soup of atoms that slammed
Yes.
together and turned on.
But once people have cut the spiritual aspect out of it, you're doing something nobody's ever done.
Yeah.
Until pretty recently
Yeah.
in human history.
That's right.
I hear Ricky Gervais say this all the time, and if he's listening, dude, I love you. I think you're funny sometimes, but I think I'm funny sometimes. So don't take that as sometimes it's not. But anyway, he was on Stephen Colbert, I think, and he said, there are people believe in thousands of God in the world, and you believe in one. Stephen Colbert said, yeah, he's a Roman Catholic. And he said, I just believe in one less than you, right? And everybody's like, oh, that makes sense. And I wanted to run up on the stage and say, hey, Ricky, can I talk to you for a second? Because, and Stephen, don't fall for this.
Yeah.
Because you have more in common with a guy who thinks there's 1,000 gods than a dude who thinks there's none.
Yeah.
And that commonality is there's judgment afterwards. There's a real spiritual realm. There is objective accountability for actions past this life.
Yeah.
We cannot jump the life to come, as Macbeth said. So it's it's getting fancy.
Literature.
Here. I know, man. I read it.
You're
That's
so
the thing.
cultured.
Oh, I need a pipe and a smoking jacket.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like we can't. If you completely excise the spiritual aspect of it, you've done something radical. That is radical.
It's
thinking.
new.
New.
It's
And
novel.
it goes contrary. I think I'm gonna go ahead and tell Ricky this too.
Yeah.
I think he has to fight that impulse all the time.
Yeah.
The reality of the fact that there is a spirit, that there is true justice, that there is objective moral issues. He probably in his brain, it's genius, has to fight it all the time, and probably embraces it at levels that if you could find those pressure points, he'd be like, well.
Yep. When he's about to be in a car crash, what does he say?
Yeah. Oh, me.
Yeah. Oh, that was wrong. Oh, man. That's funny though. So there's, that's I think framing up the situation well. That there is a competition of worldviews really at play here between are we naturalists? Everything is here just by random chance. The only way it could have happened is some kind of evolutionary thing, or is there a guiding hand, a God who's behind it? And those are the two. Actually, those are just I feel like A and B options. I don't even think that's necessarily a spectrum. That's A and B.
Yeah.
But within the B, I'll say the A option, that we are created, that there's a creator. There is this spectrum of how and when and how long ago, kind of situations. And you got the 6,000 years, and that's where we actually left that. We didn't go, how do they get 6,000 years? Where does that come from?
It's based on, as I understand, an eclipse that happened when Joshua went into the promised land. And they do some research and say, well, this is the only eclipse it could have been.
Yeah.
Therefore, we can go backwards from there, and we can kind of backwards date all the genealogy.
Yeah.
And that puts us right around 6,000 years.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's about it. Yeah, it's tracking genealogies. You start with the dating of the Exodus generally, and that's what the eclipse
Which
thing
is really hard to do.
It's hard. It took a lot of work, right?
Well, but I'm not even sure they're right when the Exodus happened.
Yeah, there's options. On
Yes,
that.
there's options.
It's not like they used to all have calendars and just keep track of those things.
Right. Like the Hebrew calendar in the Bible is only 360 days.
Yeah,
right?
they're different.
They're different.
And even in that, it's a mostly illiterate society. Folks just were not keeping. They didn't keep track of time like we do now. Now, we know every single. I know every. I can look back on my iPhone calendar.
We're tracking how long his podcast is.
and I can see how long, or every event I've done in the last couple
That's
of
right.
years.
Every
Yeah.
Sunday, your phone says, "Hey, man, you're looking at me too much. You spent 19 hours a day on your
Oh
phone,
yeah,
or whatever."
screen time.
You know?
Yeah. And so it's not like it's easy work to figure out when something like that was in ancient history. It's not. But anyways, they just track all the genealogies in like Genesis 5 and whatnot, and back or up to Abraham, and then 400 years from Abraham to Moses, because that's what God says in the promise in Genesis 15.
400 years. You're
And
going
then
captivity.
Moses, well, now we have the Exodus, right? And so
Yeah.
you start there, and that's where they get around 6,000 years. Now, what is, are there any weaknesses, I guess I should say, in that estimation
Yes.
of the age of the earth?
There's some challenges.
Challenges.
The challenges are, there's a big assumption on that eclipse.
That's true.
Also, we don't know that people aren't left out of these genealogies. Also, if you miss one person, you've missed 1,000 years nearly in the early Genesis account,
That's
because
true.
those dudes are living like 900 something years.
Yeah.
So, and we know this from genealogies we have in the New Testament. It's like 14 to Moses, 14 to David, 14 to Jesus, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, it's not. That's
Yeah.
what are we
Because
doing?
Luke and Matthew are different.
Yeah.
Yeah, the genealogies in there, and they skip people. They do different things.
Yeah.
And so genealogy didn't always like work the way, it's not like ancestry.com.
No.
Right? It's like hit the highlights.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times it's like who these are the people you know of.
Yeah, and there, yes. So it's not. It's just not. It definitely is not something worth fussing about. Or like, man, you don't think it's 6,000 years old? You must not be a Christian. It's like, what?
Yeah.
It's never been in any creedal.
It's not
Never.
in any creed or confession. It's like been understood for a long time.
But it says day one, a day and a night, man.
A day and a night. And so let's talk about that. Like, so, well, let me say this first, that we'll summarize all this conversation about science and all this kind of stuff. Let's summarize that what's at stake right now, the big deal right now,
Yeah.
is not the big deal when the Bible was written.
No.
About creation. This is the modern big deal
Oh,
about creation.
we got modern first world.
This is the modern problem,
problems.
and it's
Yeah.
because of the competing worldview, cosmology, whatever you want to say, that we're naturalists and it's evolution, things like that. right?
Actually, it's the same problem. We
Uh-huh.
just have different teams on the field.
I like it.
Yeah,
That's right. You're right.
So
yeah.
ancient days, the teams on the field where you're surrounded by pagan cultures that have many gods and many creation myths
Yep.
that were incorrect.
Yep.
Right. And so the point of the creation story is, hey, Marduk didn't make this thing.
Baal
Baal
did,
didn't
yeah.
make this thing. Yahweh made this thing, and
Yep.
here's how he made it, and this is why he owns it,
Yeah.
and you should have your
Marduk
allegiance
and
to it.
Baal are ancient little g gods,
Gods
of
like
other
Zeus.
cultures.
You might
Yeah.
in West more familiar with like
Yeah,
Zeus or
that's right.
Jupiter.
Yeah, so like the ancient big deal in creation is it's not asking how or when.
It is a little bit how.
A little bit how.
Yeah.
But when is really our most important.
Yeah, we
And-
ask when, why.
And yeah, that.
We're kind of asking the same questions, really.
But there is really who and whose.
Who's and whose. Yeah,
Yep,
that's
who
what they're
and
doing.
whose. Who did this? Who created it? And whose is all of this?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out, the modern mind wants to know how it works.
Yeah.
That's almost the driving thing
Yeah.
of,
Oh, here's a funny thing.
tell me.
This is, I guess, is a little bit back into the modern issues about like science stuff, that some of the folks who are most, I don't know, obsessed about dating Genesis 1
I know what
and
you're
at
gonna say.
war with science
Yes.
are desperately trying to use scientific method to prove their point.
This is the biggest, I should have said that.
Yeah.
This drives me nuts.
Yeah.
You cannot science a miracle. So a lot
Yeah.
of them will
You
say
did-
the
you-
world.
that's what you were getting
The
at, I think,
world is
earlier.
6,000
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
old, right? So let's measure the depth of the moon dust, because that'll tell us if
Yeah.
it's been there 6,000 years. Like,
Or
what
the
are you
Grand
doing,
Canyon
brother?
or things like
Yeah,
that.
it's like,
Yeah.
oh, look, we've got this forest here. They said it took 10 million years for it to turn to stone. We found one right here that did it in 100 years. It's like, okay.
It's a miracle.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, stop trying to use science to prove a miracle.
Yeah.
You just have to say, hey, man, this is how God made it. He just like Daffy Duck making that egg appear.
Yeah.
You know, whip. That's a little dated for most of our listeners, but I'm just saying that if God is just poofing stuff into existence, you don't need to take your light speed measure and go, well, when God first made the world, everything moved faster.
Yeah.
Like, what?
You don't have to do that.
Don't do that.
It's unnecessary.
Unnecessary.
Yeah.
And it actually makes you sound dumb.
All right. So that's the modern issues. The ancient issues are who and whose, right? And that's if you're reading the Bible, like the Bible is written originally not last year, not 100 years ago, thousands of years ago, right? Especially
They love to
at
say
Genesis.
Stone and Bronze Age shepherds wrote this thing.
Yeah,
Which, like, as if that's a slur.
and it's not.
It's like, man, these guys are geniuses.
That's like the lie
if
of
there's no
progressivism.
God,
Yeah.
if there's no God, and atheists are right, and they love to say Stone Age shepherds wrote this thing
Yeah.
or whatever. If there's no God, Stone Age shepherds crafted a narrative that changed the world.
Man.
So give those guys some credit, okay, atheists? That's amazing.
It is-
I believe these guys.
Yeah, and
over you.
Yeah, and it's incredible literature too. It's
Incredible.
I know
It's true. That's why.
some folks look at the Bible and because it's unfamiliar to them, they are they're frustrated by it sometimes because not just answering their question they have right there in that moment. They think that it's not elegant. The Bible is wildly elegant.
Wildly.
Like the literature level.
Yeah, you fix to write a poem right now.
Man, I'm about
I
to
could get
break out in the
misty
song.
over it.
Yeah.
I've listened to guys, and it tells what they're thinking about. Like Sam Harris, he recognizes one of the biggest challenges, and he's Jewish, but he's an atheist. One of the biggest obstacles to atheism is how do we build a morality that we can all agree on?
Yeah.
Like, how do we do that? Because there's no greater thing than our brains, and everything is. I didn't mean that as a joke, but it was funny.
Yeah.
There's no greater thing than our brains and our society. So what is morality really?
Yeah.
And how do we do that? But I've heard him say if God is the God of all things and he's so smart and knows everything, why didn't he write about antibiotics? You know, why didn't he tell us like, hey man, if your appendix gets swelled up, here's how you get it out. And I wanted to say, I always do really good in these debates when I'm not there. I always think, man, maybe there's something more important than not dying in this world.
Yeah.
Like maybe he's driving at something else.
Yeah.
And maybe creation and science helps us with that. He's got another book, and it's creation.
Yeah.
So we can read it and we can figure stuff out. And it's beautiful.
That's beautiful.
And I think that's why people love it as a God, is because creation tells us about God. And science is beautiful.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. It is the worship of the creation instead of the creator. And there's a verse about that.
Yeah.
Romans.
Yeah. I
the
wonder
whole
which
thing.
is greater, creation or creator.
Which one wins?
That's not in the Bible. I just made that up. But yeah.
So let's look at the text a little bit then. And so we're kind of talking about like the ancient big deal about creation, and which means that we need to like, you know, what were their big deals? Like what were they interacting with in Genesis 1?
They're pushing back on false narratives or myths that men have created about the creation, about how it came to be. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about ancient myth and creation, how did the universe come to be in those creation stories? And it's like, Marduk hit a big snake in the head.
Yeah,
and
Tiamat.
killed it.
Yeah.
And then like carved out from its body the world, or there was a big giant that was asleep, and somebody knocked it in the head, and some people jumped out.
That's literally what it's written down. Like that's like
these are literal like things that happen. It's turtles,
or it's not things that happened. It's literally it's stories that they had. Yeah,
and so that's what happens.
Yeah,
and so in contrast to that, if you read it in that context, like if you could jump back from our modern questions. How it came into being. It's always this primordial struggle between chaos and order, and gods of chaos and gods of order getting in a big fight, and the order God winning and making stuff out of it. But it's always a fight.
Yeah.
But the creation narrative in Scripture says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Like he made it out of nothing.
One sentence.
Yeah. And then he says, let there be light, and there was light. There's no fight. There are no other gods around.
Yep.
There's no other anything around, and it's very peaceful. He's just talking.
Yep.
And he is making worlds through his word.
Yep.
Which we talked about a little bit last week, the importance of the word. So yeah, it's in that setting, God is super awesome already because he's not in conflict with anything that poses any sort of threat to him.
Yeah.
The world is not born out of chaos. It's born out of nothing.
Yeah.
Mind of God making stuff.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to the whole issue of like it does speak to the issue of like how old the earth is in some sense of like, if someone is worked up about, 6,000 years or old earth or something like that, that what's happening here is not a power issue.
No.
Right. Whatever that you put on it is not about what God can do.
What we can agree about across the board, it should be the big deal. And here's the big deal.
That's the name of our podcast.
Here's the big deal. Whose is it?
Yep.
Who made it?
Mm-hmm.
What do you make it for?
Who's in charge?
Yeah, who's in charge?
Yep.
This is what Genesis 1 is actually answering for us. And because we've had it so long, we have forgotten the beauty of those answers.
Yep.
And so now we've got in our if you wrestle a pig, you both get up muddy, right?
Yep.
And so when you take your fight to science or in the modern day, there are fights we need to have with how people are using science.
Mm-hmm.
And by fights, I mean debates. Like, what are you using this for? You're sticking a square hole in a round peg here, brother. We got to have those conversations. But whenever you're like using science to try to prove miracles, you've actually fallen into their trap.
Yeah,
because
that's right.
they're going to beat
That's
you
right.
at that every time. Because science and miracles don't work.
That's right.
Together.
So it's polemics. It's like ancient apologetics in a lot of ways, but it's not the same kind of apologetics we're trying to do. It's they're combating other cultures, other you could say religions or something, understandings about how the world came about. Their neighbors, like Israel, the nation, their neighbor, they're surrounded by pagans, by like rough pagans too, rough societies.
We know this, like horrible stuff, y'all.
Yeah, real bad stuff. And the narrative of Genesis 1 is combating. It's like the argument, or it's like the debate. We just had the big debate and stuff. This is like the debate against, like Baal or, Babylon. Let's say Babylon culture like puts up their argument. This is how it all came about. Well, this is Yahweh answering, God answering is like, no, this is how it happened. Yeah. And it's like way better.
Way better.
Way more powerful.
There's a consequence when you think the world was made with this constant struggle with chaos. Yeah. And that you have to appease these gods who are so violent.
Yep. And who will let the chaos take you.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Man. And you have to appease them.
Yeah.
They're by nature not good.
Yep. Yeah.
That's why I start like God. One of the things is, why would you serve them? They offer their children in the fire, a thing I would never imagine asking you to do.
Yep. And what's could you imagine hearing those kind of stories? You're in the ancient Near East, right? You're in the ancient world back there. And these are the stories you're used to. That these gods, your crops rely on basically you having a proper sacrifice, you possibly giving up your firstborn child in a sacrifice in fire.
Yeah.
And then hearing the story of Genesis 1 and 2, where God creates humanity and they puts them in a beautiful garden full of fruit.
Yeah.
That, eat as much as you want.
And he cares for them like children.
Yeah, cares for them like children, man. Like that is wildly different and wildly attractive and incredible.
And you're reading the story and it's like, not only are these poor folks, like we went to Cozumel recently and they were telling us about the sort of sacrifice they were making down in Mexico for the crops and every year the things they had to do. And it's just heinous. They're tossing people off pyramids. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And you hear this story. And so they're doing all these things, desperately trying to earn the favor of their gods. Mm-hmm. And the story of Israel is they do everything they can to upset Yahweh. And he keeps going, all right, kids, come on back.
I forgive you.
I forgive you. Come
Yep.
back. Come on, let's
Yep.
talk about this.
It is a wildly different picture of
Yes.
deity, and so
They can't run him off.
they can't run.
And you can't. They
He's
can't
just
run
crazy
off
about
Yahweh.
humans.
He loves
He
them
loves
so much,
humans,
and
yeah.
they keep coming back. And Baal worshippers are out there chopping themselves to pieces, and Baal's taking a nap.
Yeah,
I mean, you hear that, and you're like, seriously, what's the price of admission? They're like circumcision. You're like, ooh, okay. I mean, people still joined.
yeah, they did. That's so funny.
Oh man,
So that's what's
we're
at
going to be a
stake.
PG podcast. now.
That's a PG reference right there.
It's in the Bible.
Yeah, that's the big deal about Genesis 1. Or one of the big deals. We say the big deal about creation. Here's one other thing we should probably talk about is just the reality that there's not one creation account. There are multiple creation accounts in the Bible, and that comes as kind of like a shock to people. Like what do you mean? Like there are 2 creation accounts even within the first 2 chapters of Genesis. And so, it's like one of those things, if you're going to get worked up over what the word literal means in Genesis, you got to deal with the reality that there are differences between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 in order.
Well, there's a
timing.
lot of issues with reading it just woodenly, we should say.
That's
because
right.
it's in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth, and He says, "Let there be light," and there was light. And it's a morning and an evening, day
Yep.
one. It
Yep.
says morning and an evening, one day.
Yep.
One day, Yom Echad, one day.
But there are no stars yet.
There are no sun.
Where'd the light come
There's
from?
not even a planet Earth.
Yeah.
How do we have a day one here?
Yep.
What's going on? We
A
don't
day
get the
is
sun until like
is
day
a
3.
revolution of the earth, right?
You say you want a revolution?
I did do this, didn't I?
You did.
Yeah.
You did. Say you want a revolution? Whoop,
Yeah.
whoop. Yeah. So, man, take it easy.
Yeah. You get to in Genesis 2, and it's like, there's verse 4, these are the records of the heavens and the earth according to their creation. At the time that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, no shrub of the field had yet grown on the land, and no plant of the field had yet sprouted, for Lord God had not made it rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground. And then you verse 7, then the Lord God formed the man out of the dust from the ground and breathed breath of life into his nostrils, and the man became a living being. And this is before there is any plants. Now in Genesis 1, plants are made before humans, right? And humans are created as plural in Genesis 1, right?
Yeah, it's like a Genesis 1 is sort of the bird's eye view at 10,000 feet.
Yep.
And then it's like the camera lens pulls
Yep.
in, precious, to the creation of man in the land.
Yep. And one is by word, and one is with
Dust and breath.
Yep, and breath.
And spirit.
Oh, yes, breath, spirit. That's
Breath,
right.
spirit.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in Hebrew, you can't see it in English. And this doesn't happen a lot, so don't let your confidence in the Bible be undermined. But sometimes there's word plays you can't translate. And so ruach means...
Ooh.
Yeah,
that was good. Yeah.
I tell you,
That's
that's why
some Hebrew.
I went to school and paid for it to give you this for free. It means spirit or breath.
Yeah.
So when he breathes the breath into him, it's also spirit, right?
Yeah.
So he's breathing life into Adam's, and he blew it into his nostrils. That's
Yeah.
where you put it.
Yeah, so it's different, but that's not a problem.
It's not a problem.
It's because what's the point? What's
It's
the big
different, but
deal?
it's the same.
It's the same. It's
Yeah.
creation.
Yes.
He's making humans.
Oh, and he
Yeah.
does another thing that
Yeah.
nobody else in the Near East did or ever since or ever before.
Yeah.
He's making them like him in his
Yeah.
image.
Oh.
These
We'll
are
talk about
his
that.
children.
We'll get that one next week, probably. Yeah.
Samesies.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a glorious thing.
Yeah.
The whole deal about trying to fight for equality and stuff is founded in the image of God.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That our value is intrinsic, not because we're human, but because we're the children of God.
Yeah.
And every single one of them is important.
That's right.
So yeah, it's that's a radically different story than you're getting around in Assyria.
Yeah.
or
big
Babylon
time.
or Egypt.
Who's important in Assyria?
Technically the God King.
Yeah.
I mean,
And what about everyone else?
yeah, they're just peasants. They're nothing.
They're to be
Fodder.
used and abused. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that next time. We're gonna camp out at the beginning because it sets up all the themes, for the whole narrative.
The other thing is the challenges you have.
Yeah.
I guess challenges in this world building in chapter 1 is we find out later a lot of things go on that just simply aren't addressed. That I want a novel on from God.
Yeah.
Like, for example, we have this dude show up, Satan, the accuser.
Yeah.
The guy, the snake in the garden, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Snake in the grass, dirty
Yeah.
dog. We know it's the devil, right?
Uh-huh.
What's his story from Genesis 1?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Like, he just shows up. And
Have you ever heard of this?
And by the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
I'm getting ahead, but
Yeah.
he's not pictured as evil
Yeah.
in the creation
Yeah.
account. He's wise.
Oh, he's
More wise. And sometimes it's translated crafty, but it
Yeah.
is the word wiser than any beast of the field.
Yep.
And so the original fall, we'll get to this in the narrative, is
Yeah.
not crafted as a choice between good and evil, but a choice between wisdom and foolishness.
Yeah. Here, let me run this by.
Tell me,
See
tell
what
me.
what do you think about
I
this?
can't wait.
I've heard this. I don't know what I think about it yet, though. So some folks believe that. There's this one issue is like, when are angels, angelic spiritual beings created?
Yeah, when?
At what point are they created?
When did they fall?
When did they fall? Both of those things. And some folks answer it actually in Genesis 1, which is kind of interesting. Is in verse 14. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night. They'll serve as signs for the seasons and for days and years. And they will be lights in the expanse of the sky to provide light on the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule over the day and lesser light to rule over the night, as well as the stars. God placed them in the expanse of the sky to provide light on the earth, to rule the day and night and separate light from darkness. Saw that it was good. Later in the Old Testament, angels are referred to as like stars, and you see it in Revelation too.
Yeah, yeah.
That these stars,
The serpent swiped
Yeah.
a third of the, swiping a third of the stars from the heavens.
yeah, they're like these. Now it's not trying to say that stars are literally actually angels. It's like an image for it, like to give meaning for it. There's a reference somewhere where they're worshiping stars, little g gods, right? And so like that's not supposed to be doing that. That's a problem, big problem. And so they would say that like this is the creation of the spiritual, and they rule over
Yeah.
the heavens.
Well, see
or
what's
something,
going on there.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
don't
tell
know.
you. I'm gonna tell you
Yeah.
what's going on.
Tell me what's going
Nonsense.
on. Nonsense.
Yeah. So what's happening is
Yeah.
we're craving that story.
Yeah, and
We
they're
wanna-
looking for it somewhere.
We got to find it somewhere.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we got to kind of take our crowbar and just like pry open verse 14 and
Yeah.
stuff some angels in there.
Yeah.
And that's not what happened. And God never gave us the story.
Yeah.
We don't know about the fall of
Yeah.
angels.
What,
We know it happened.
Job, the angels are there watching the creation. Isn't that
Like
isn't that-
live.
Yeah, isn't that
There's
sons of
and they're
God
called
are-
the sons of God, and they're
they're
assembled, and in walks Satan.
Yeah,
And God calls him out in front of all his brother angels. And he's
we
like,
got to put on the brakes.
"Hey,
We're
where
going
have
too
you
far.
been?"
Like,
I know,
we're talking about Satan and stuff.
But what
Yeah.
I'm saying is,
yeah.
in Genesis 1 and 2, we're getting a very not brush over, but if you're expecting Genesis 1 and 2 to explain the entire story, you're reading it wrong. It's not trying to tell you how exactly old the world is. It's not trying to tell you every single thing that happened, even though we would like to know, because there's crazy stuff. I want to know the story of the fall, right? Of Satan.
Yeah.
All these things, all he's saying is, I made this world. I put it, it's orderly.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point of the creation, is it's orderly and
Yep.
it works. And I put you in it, human beings, in my image, to worship and obey and to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
That was the point. I
Yep.
wanted you to enjoy this place, and I made it awesome so that when you looked at it, you'd go, God's awesome. Whoa. Like every time you make a scientific discovery or something, quarks or quantum physics or, Schrodinger's cat or whatever you're doing, where it's like the stuff moves in quantum physics and you don't know where it is till you look at it kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Weird things like that. You should be like, man, God is wise and pretty creative and awesome. And we bought these things at Sam's,
Oh yeah.
and they're called plum cherries.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Have you seen them?
Nuh-uh.
Okay, people.
They good?
Delicious. But they're like big. They're either big cherries or small plums.
Can't tell which.
I don't know which. And I'm going somewhere with this in creation,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So yesterday I worshiped the Lord through a plum cherry. And so we were like, let's just buy them. Why not? We were at Sam's,
Yeah.
just buy stuff. Go crazy. We got out in the parking lot and almost didn't get in our car because we're just sitting there in the parking lot eating plum cherries. They were so delicious. And here's the deal. There's no real reason for us to have taste buds that I can think of. Except to enjoy plum cherries. This is the whole point of your taste buds is to eat one of these things.
Yeah.
And the only issue we had was what do we do with these seeds? Because they still have the big cherry seed in it. And I was wondering if it was moral to just throw them down in the parking lot. It felt wrong.
Huh.
I don't know. Maybe I could have, but it felt wrong.
Oh, it's like this littering?
Yeah, I felt like I was littering. I can't stand
Biodegradable.
littering.
Yeah.
Maybe some bird or something eat it.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, plum cherries is evidence of God.
That's right.
If I'd have been an atheist at that moment, I challenge all atheists and agnostics. Eat one of those plum cherries. Tell me there ain't no God.
Yeah. All right, let's put it all together.
Okay.
So, Genesis 1, the big deal is creation. And really, this podcast is about what's the big deal about creation. And the big deal is that God did it.
He did it.
He's in charge of it. He did it. He's
God
king.
did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's the one who made everything. And that's the big deal. But that's what the Bible has to say about creation. That comes from God. And when it comes down to the different theories about when it happened, how it happened, things like that, it's not written in creeds and confessions. It's not something that's like my answer is actually I don't know. And I'm fine with that. I'm
Totally
super
fine.
like it could be
If I get to heaven, God's like, this thing was 14.5 billion years old, and I just blew up this stuff, I'd be like, that's awesome.
Sure.
They'd be like,
Yeah.
actually, I just flipped a switch, 6,500 years old. I'd be like, that's awesome.
Yep. They're fine. They're all fine.
I'll be like, really?
Yeah. yeah.
Seriously? That's what happened?
You
You're like,
did- you made
I'll
it
be like,
all
how'd
like
the
that.
How'd the Aborigines get in Australia, Lord? What in the world?
What did you do?
How'd
yeah.
you get the kangaroos down there only in the wallabies?
Yeah.
Like, what? In 6,500 years all that happened?
Yeah. So it's fine. And
Yeah.
and you shouldn't be dogmatic over that kind of view. That shouldn't be something that you should like split over and
No, you
get all
should
worked
fuss
up
with your
about it.
buddy about it like saying Alabama is superior to Auburn.
Yeah.
That's the kind of fight we should be having.
It's like worth talking. So what's at stake in those arguments? What do you think is at stake?
What happens is people get their so you got a kid that goes to school and he starts studying geology or something, and there's a lot of evidence, or they study the cosmology, and it looks old.
Yeah.
Like the light physically can't get here, much less it takes 9 minutes for the light to get from the sun to the earth.
Yeah.
So like the nearest star takes a long time for light to get here. And the farthest ones we can see are like millions of light years away. And they're millions of light years across. Like
Yeah.
even just like the Milky Way galaxy.
Yeah.
Millions of light years, meaning traveling 181,000 miles per second approximately. It takes you millions of years to get across
Crazy.
the thing. Just nuts. Big. Huge. Like
Very
we can't even
big.
think these big.
Yep.
And so a kid gets in school and he says, and it's like, this is 6,500 years old. How does this work?
Yep.
And so that's when guys come in and they're like, well, this is how it can work.
Yeah.
And they start making miracle upon miracle because they're messing with science. They're like, well, this is how it could have happened. The light bulbs didn't work. And in the beginning, when everything God made it, he sent it out there faster than the speed of light. And that just starts monkeying with all kinds of physics. Weird stuff starts happening. And then kids are hearing it going, so you're telling me if I don't believe the world is 6,500 years old, I'm not really a Christian and I don't really believe the Bible. I can't do that. I can't get
Yeah.
there. And so they think they can't be Christians.
Yeah.
And that makes me upset.
Yeah. And it's not like it's compromised. Like that's not what we're saying here is like because there's this pressure in the world to believe a certain way, we need to compromise a view that's been long held, and it's not that at all.
Yeah.
It's not been a held view.
No.
And it's also not compromised because that's not what Genesis 1 and
And
2 is
also
about.
people who are doing that are probably insecure
Yeah.
about what science does and stuff. And they're like, well, I mean, if your faith is overthrown, if the world is old, that's messed up, man.
Yeah.
That's messed up. Like, I believe Jesus, a Jewish dude, like 2,000 years ago, rose from the dead
Yeah.
and is the living God.
Yeah, for real.
Creation account, by comparison, is not even the biggest miracle, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's
It's
right.
so much bigger to believe in a triune God and that one person of that Trinity was incarnate in human flesh and literally lives in heaven now, wherever that is.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he ascended into heaven? Was heaven up? And there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I
I'm
know,
feeling
yeah.
heaven up sounds like 7-Up or something. But yeah. So it's come on.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Don't get worked up about it. It doesn't.
But if you
there's not
do-
much at stake.
If you do, let's
Yeah.
have it like an intramural argument.
Yeah.
You know, like, hey, and there's issues, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, if the world's really, really old,
Yeah.
and you think that it's some sort of theistic evolution, how do you deal with the fact that Adam seems like a real person?
Yeah.
And as an
Jesus
older
talks
creation,
about him.
yeah. And the fall, everything's pretty central to this dude bringing death in the world.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, that's a good one. And then I'm like, how do you deal with Aborigines in Australia if it's only 6,500 years old?
Yeah.
Like, what? How'd those guys get there now? They were ancient seafarers. There's no such thing as ancient.
Yeah.
And
So-
then they forgot how to build boats. They just got stuck in Australia, which is kind of like the hellish continent on Earth.
Yeah.
Every bug there wants to kill you. Every snake is deadly. They
just
got
got stuck
sharks in
there.
the water.
Like Moana.
Yeah, they're stuck in Australia. Like, we've got here and forgot how to build boats.
Yeah.
I mean, there's parts of Australia that's nice, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm just jealous of them. And
They have Bluey.
They're winning the culture war through that.
Yeah. Bluey's great.
Bluey's great.
Yeah. So there's not much at stake. Don't get worked up about it.
Not in a lose my faith
and
kinda
if,
worked
yeah,
up
not in that
about it.
kind of way. But if you want to talk about it and have a conversation about it, I think that would be fun.
Fun.
And we could do that. That's all we're going to say about it here, though.
Where's my fossil?
Yeah, you
Hang
got a
on.
fossil in here?
I do. Hang on one second. So I got this thing in Lebanon. It's this little fish. And I bought it because it's awesome. And also it says 100 million years in Byblos, which is like the oldest settlement in the world, like where people were in Lebanon. I got this there. And so it's this cool little fish. And I bought it just to like put it on my desk. It says 100 million. I don't know. This thing could be 50 years old.
Yeah.
I don't have a clue. I'm sure the dude that stuck this on here is not a scientist or whatever. And he's not a Christian. He's probably Muslim.
Yeah.
So I just put that on there so people look at that and judge me. That's it. I don't even know how old this fish
That's so
is, but
funny.
I
Yeah.
can tell it's like 100 million years. I don't know. That's what the sticker said.
what the
This
sticker
this
says.
sticker was
Yeah.
actually on the fish.
Yeah.
God labeled it.
Yep.
What are you gonna do?
In English.
In English, before there was Englishing. Man,
That's funny.
there you go.
Oh, look at that.
The Byblos fish, the thing that proves the ancient nature of the world. I have no idea.
I don't know.
It could be young.
It could be young.
I like it that it's
not a
young
power
because the
issue.
rebel in me is
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
ha,
Yeah.
it's young. God just went, pow. And you silly gooses, should just believe the Bible.
Yeah.
But then again, I like the idea of deep time and God like doing wild stuff. Like, what's he doing? Why were there dinosaurs?
Yeah, why?
I don't know. Maybe if the Earth is young, dudes were riding them. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, people believe that. Yeah,
Yeah, people believe that. Or maybe he was just making this big old megafauna. And God's just like a childlike, not in wisdom,
Yeah.
but like in his glorious creation. And he talks about it.
Look, well-
He's like, who sees the big Leviathan in the deep ocean? Who sees that thing?
Yeah.
This was ancient world, right? And Job, it's like nobody sees it but God. Why does he have it there? Because the Lord delights in it.
Yeah.
God made a great big blue whale.
Yeah.
This thing could swallow a school bus, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
You ever seen one?
No. Heard they're
I
big, though.
haven't either.
Yeah.
I saw some bones of one time.
Okay.
And you could fit a Volkswagen
They're
right through
huge.
its mouth. Yep.
Yeah.
Crazy big. Why God make it? Because he looks at it and goes, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
I like that thing.
How neat is that?
God watches it jump up and that monstrous thing eats krill.
Yeah.
And God just watches it eating out there.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, I like that thing.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the whole reason.
Yeah, we're really like pragmatic people that like, it's like, why, someone like, starts thinking about the dinosaurs. Why would God make them if they didn't have something to do with humanity? And it's like, Man, there's so much in this world that God made that doesn't have anything to do with you.
Well, that's the
And
same
it
people say.
glorifies
Why do you do art?
yeah. That's
Why
like,
don't you do art?
Yeah.
Why do you play with Hot Wheels?
yeah.
Because it's fun. That's why God
right.
does a lot of stuff. He doesn't have to do anything. He just
Yeah.
does stuff he likes and fun. He's like, he retired from work after 6 days, first of all.
Yeah.
And then he just messes around. He's like, I made this monstrous whale. And watch this. I'm going to make it swim under this tourist boat. And they're all going to go, ah! It's going to be hilarious. I think he did that.
Yeah.
And he's got
He
flowers
did.
that open up in the morning. You're like, oh, they're so pretty. And then they close up. And every day it's like, oh, they're so pretty.
Yeah.
And he just likes it.
Everything on this earth could be gray and brown
Brown and with no taste.
with no taste. It could be like that, but it's not.
It's not. But when we get to heaven, what about, man, earth was gray and brown and tasteless.
Oh, in comparison. Mm-hmm. That'll preach.
There's more to come.
Yeah.
But right now it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. All right. We're running out of time, Brad. Super fun talk. We're going to keep talking about Genesis 1 because there's a bunch of themes that set up
Narratively.
in the narrative.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about the Aretz,
Oh.
the land.
Yeah, that's some more Hebrew.
What is going on in the Bible in Genesis about the land.
And humanity.
The promised land.
The promised land.
Right? What's going on with it? It actually starts in Genesis 1.
Yep.
The promised land.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about that next week. So
Next
we're going to talk
week.
about maybe a little more of the actual nuts and bolts of the creation story.
Yeah.
And but how it matters to the story, the narrative, not how it matters to science. I'm
Yeah.
a man of science.
Yeah. If you comment the reference,
I
you
threw out a
win
lot
something.
today.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching listening to the Big Deal podcast.
Either which way,
Either which way. We appreciate you.
we appreciate you.